Well, George Pickens is letting us know who he thinks will be the next big receiver at Georgia. And it's actually something that we talked about when George came over after his pro day was done. Carson Beck was throwing to him, Carson with a few good balls. And a lot of people really thought George looked good on Wednesday. And so naturally, when he came over, the questions became about what the future would be. And one thing George talked about was that he wanted to sort of elevate the position at Georgia and give the program the type of receiver or receivers that it hadn't had in a while. And honestly, George is that way. He had it would have been fun to see what it would have been like with him in there in 2021. Much of George's career at Georgia was well, about a third of his career at Georgia was sidelined with an injury, particularly in the 2021 season. But he came back during the playoff in the SEC championship game, I guess to some degree, the Georgia Tech game, and really went off from that point. From that perspective, went off is not the right way to put it, but he had that big catch, which is really huge in Georgia's run. And if that's what he's remembered for, so be it. But he really part of Georgia's legacy is that we didn't see all of him at once. I mean, it's a little bit like Todd Gurley, someone with spectacular talent that was hurt. Thomas Brown had the same problem. It happens. But when George was asked about who the next great receiver at Georgia would be, he said he thought it would be A.D. Mitchell. Um, and when you think about AD making the biggest play in the SEC, excuse me, in the national championship game, um, it really it really changed the game. Um, According to Kirby Smart, it changed the game. He said 80 on top, that won the game. Kirby Smart told the team in the locker room after the game, make sure you're picking up DAWGSTRUCTION before I go into the fourth printing of this thing. We've got some interesting, breakdowns of stuff. Obviously, photos you won't see anywhere else. We know that to be true. But it talks a lot about the Alabama-Georgia game and that series for sure, too. So make sure you're picking up DAWGSTRUCTION today. 80 pages, hardcover, coffee table. You will have this book for decades, probably. It's well worth the money. I think if A.D. Mitchell is the guy that you're depending on from here on out, that shows that Kirby Smart and Company have done a heck of a job of identifying talent because A.D. Mitchell was not a high level guy coming out of high school in terms of his recruiting status. But he ended this past season with 29 catches for 426 yards, including that 40-yard touchdown against Alabama, 4 touchdowns. It was a heck of a season for him. His biggest game was the Tennessee game. Of course, he's a Tennessee native, going 5 catches for 65 yards, including a 22-yarder. So there were only a few games where he had fewer than 2 catches. Typically, he had 2 catches or more. He did not have a catch against Clemson. And if you remember, um, AD, I said he was a Tennessee native. He's got a couple hometowns, but um, nonetheless, he I don't know if it's Missouri City, Tennessee, or Antioch, Tennessee. It's Missouri City, Texas, or Antioch, Tennessee, but someone else can correct me on that. But um, the big thing with him was that he had such a big spring game in 2021, if you recall. I mean, there were a lot of people talking about how big a deal that AD had become, and uh, it's hard to really kind of process that with guys that are freshmen because you can't trust the spring. You can't totally um, you can't totally trust what you hear in the spring because it's the spring. And there's no certainty that lighting people up in practice is an indicator that you're going to light people up in games. But with AD Mitchell, it turned out to be true. And he is going to have to be the kind of guy that rips up people in the future. Because if you look at Georgia's receivers, um, they are. I mean, you're missing George now, and George was a game-changing wide receiver. But you still have this group: Kyrus Jackson, Blaylock, Rosemary Jack Saint, Smith. Now, a couple of those guys got to get healthy and stay healthy. McConkey and Mitchell at a minimum, and they've added guys as well. I do think that one hope in getting BMAC in as a wide receivers coach is that your recruiting will step up even higher. But with AD Mitchell, they really Georgia Georgia identified someone who has superb talent and turned them loose, developed them in a matter of a year. But this freshman class, Bright Bowers, A.D. Mitchell, and it's not the same recruiting class, but Lad McConkey, those young guys really making people pay this year. Between those three, you can make the argument that they were the most impactful guys this season. I mean, I think Burton certainly had a good year, but between McConkey, Bowers, and A.D. Mitchell, all of which played as freshmen or redshirt freshmen, I mean, they definitely had good seasons. But George thinks it's going to be A.D. Mitchell, and I see where he's coming from with that. This is going to be a team that will have to depend on um, younger guys continuing to play well, sophomores and younger. But when you're making plays like he did in this national championship game, um, that kind of cements you as beyond a role player. It's you're a difference maker. You're a person that matters a lot. And Georgia's offense is going to have to you know, be better in terms of production this season because the defense is not going to be quite as good. So if the defense gives up five more uh, five more points a game and the offense gets five more a game, then it's irrelevant that the that the defense is giving up more. But do you think AD Mitchell is going to be a spectacular player for Georgia? Do you think that George Pickens is right? Do you think that George's career was kind of taken from him in a way just because of the injuries? Tell me what you think below. Please make sure that you're checking out DAWGSTRUCTION. We're about to have to go to the fourth printing of this. Every time I go to another printing, it means that it takes me a little bit longer to get them to you. So make sure you order. I got about 20 left right now in this recording, and they go pretty quick. So make sure you're picking it up today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the website.